Hey guys, Alan here. Welcome back to my workshop. A lot cooler today, thankfully, than last time I spoke to you. About 22, 23 degrees just at the moment, so I'm going to make the most of that. In this video, I want to get stuck into a job that I've been frightened of, to be honest, for a long time, which is hacking up some 25mm or 1-inch thick steel plate using a torch. I've only done a very small amount of cutting with a torch and only very thin stuff. So this will be an experience. Let's see how it goes. Right, so I want to turn this piece of scrap, it's a big piece of scrap, it's a piece of 1-inch plate, 1-inch thick or 25mm thick plate. I probably bought it about 30 years ago, something like that, when I had ideas of making my own hydraulic press, but I never did that. I finished up buying one. And this is just sat in the corner waiting for something to happen. So I've decided to clean it up a little bit and to cut what I'm going to call a bed plate out of it to increase the amount of table real estate in my hydraulic press. So I'm no gun with a flame cutter, but I think I'm set up to trim this edge to start with, and we'll see how that goes. So as will quickly become apparent, I really have very little expertise with flame cutting. I did a bit many years ago when I built my workshop, but I haven't done it for ages. I've never tried to cut anything as thick as 1-inch plate. Anyway, I thought I'd give it a crack. So I started off by trying to run the torch, cutting head of the torch along a straight edge, and obviously so to cut in a straight line, but also to try and keep the cutting tip a constant height from the work cut, from the cut surface. But I don't know, that's not a very good idea really, I don't think, so I'll have to find a better way to do it. But this really isn't going very well at all, as I'm sure any experienced torch operator would tell by looking at it. It's sort of cutting through, but I'm sort of losing it, and anyway. And it's about this time I started to realise that I'd forgotten to do any sort of a preheat on the plate. So somewhat belatedly I decided to do a bit of that, but really had no idea how much preheating would make sense for a piece of 1-inch plate. So what I did then was probably hopelessly inadequate. But anyway, you can only do what you can do. So I struggled on anyway, and to be fair, it wasn't all bad. It was certainly did cut most of it. But as anybody who's tried to do this sort of thing knows, cutting most of it isn't really that useful. And as you'll see when I get to the end, trying to separate the piece off turned into a major drama. So my first effort was to try and part this piece off using a hammer and chisel, and it was working to a degree, but it's a lot of hard work and very slow progress. I also tried putting a big spanner on it and seeing if I could wrench it off with that, and that sort of worked up the wide end of the strip that I was cutting off, but it didn't work at the other end, so I got the torch out and had another go at it. I didn't really want to do that because I knew that would leave a mess, but I didn't really have too much trouble, so I was back out with a chisel again, and eventually managed to wrestle the piece off. So I doubt that it's the world's worst oxy cut, but it's certainly nothing to be proud of either. So I was trying to decide really whether to have another go or just put up with it the way it is. But I think a significant part of the problem was I used a number 12 cutting tip, and I probably should have used a number 15 for 1-inch plate. But I did actually do a test cut on a piece of 20mm plate, and using a number 12 tip, and that worked out fine. It seemed to cut really quite easily, so I assumed that it was capable of doing a bit more. But I did also forget to do any preheating, and I'm sure that didn't help either. So I decided to have another go using a number 15 tip, and this time around I decided that I'd give it a pretty good going over with preheat. Again, I don't have any experience, so I have no idea just how much preheating is actually required, but I thought I'd give it a pretty fair bit of a warm up. Got off to a fairly explosive start there, but with my lack of experience, I have no idea what actually caused that. But it, yeah, well, I didn't enjoy the experience. But again, I couldn't quite hit my stride here and get a nice continuous cut happening. And I don't know what the issue is. I'm going to do a couple more practice cuts, I think. And I'm not sure whether the issue is that the tip isn't the correct height for the job, or whether I just didn't have the gas correctly adjusted. I'm thinking it's more likely that. So I'll have a play with that with a subsequent test run. But this cut really didn't improve matters much at all, as you'll see shortly. Well, we certainly had a lot more heat. And that's the smoke detector going off just after everything's finished. And it came off a bit easier. Now, having cleaned it up a bit and got rid of some of the slag, it looks a little bit better. But I think I probably was doing better with the smaller tip and should have just done a lot more preheat. So I think for my next cut, that's what I might do. Go back to the smaller tip and increase the amount of time I spend preheating it. Well, at least it's hacked a piece off, and I guess I'm within grinding tolerance. I mean, I don't know what's reasonable to expect really for a freehand cut. Probably better than that. Yeah, so that isn't particularly good, but it's actually a bit better than. So this cut here was on it when it was given to me or when I picked it up. So I think I've done a bit better than that, but it's not saying a lot, is it? Anyway, I suppose I'm within grinding tolerance, so let's get on with it. So I decided to try using the wheel kit that came with the cutting head, and there you saw me just checking the height of the heating tips against a 3mm thick piece of metal. The idea was to try to prove to myself that I did actually have the tips of the heating cones set 3mm above the face of work, which was, as far as I could tell, the recommended height. But I'm not sure about that either, actually. Anyway, things got off to a fairly explosive start here, as you can see. Also, as you saw, I gave it a pretty solid dose of preheating as well. Anyway, we'll speed up to get through this. Alright, well that's got it hacked off. Not the most elegant cut again, but that's probably not too bad. Well, a bit of cleaning up to do. Okay, so I've cleaned a lot of the slag off the this side. This is the untouched side. So clearly it's not a particularly good cut, but on the other hand, it is sort of straight, and I've got a couple of deep incursions. But well, and it's a square cut too, which was interesting, because with the first cut I didn't manage to keep it completely square. You can see there's a couple of areas where I just didn't cut through, and that's what was stopping it from falling off. But I've been doing a bit more reading, and I set the tip pressures according to a chart that I found that said that for all this sort of cutting I should be using 100 kPa for the acetylene and 350 kPa for the oxygen, and that was supposedly good for 25 to 50, I think, millimetres. No, sorry, 25 to 75, but obviously at 25 I'm right on the low end of that. So I found another chart that suggests 180 for oxygen, so 100 for the acetylene, 180 for oxygen. But I'm also hampered by the fact that my cylinders are small. I've got D-size cylinders, and not really supposed to, I gather, draw acetylene off the D-size cylinder at the rate that's needed to do this sort of cutting. So I'm sort of playing with fire a little bit there, if you'll pardon the pun. But you got to fight. What was it? Somebody said recently, you got to fight wars with the armies you got. Anyway. I think I might have another go cutting this piece off with a hole in it, using the settings of 80 kPa for oxygen, for acetylene, because I saw another recommendation that's all you need, and 180 for the oxygen, and we'll see how that goes. So we'll get set up for that. So straight away the flame was a lot less angry than it had been, a lot less intimidating, but it seemed to just start cutting really nicely compared to where I had been. So I was getting quite optimistic that things were going to get better. So I was proceeding at a good rate, and then I got a bit carried away, and when I got to the end I pulled the torch away before it actually finished cutting. But fortunately the uncut piece was quite small, and it was in fact very easy to break the cut piece off. So as you can see here, it left a corner attached, but otherwise got a pretty darn good result. And I was just annoyed with myself that I stopped cutting too soon. Well, that's a hell of a difference between the before and the after. And it's all down to having used excessive gas pressure, because of the recommendation that let's say I misinterpreted it. But anyway, that's a very good result. Much happier with that, and it gives me the confidence to carry on and do a bit more. So from studying these pictures, it looks like I've got the preheat flame a bit too large. So for my next cut I'll make that a bit smaller. You can see the pattern. It actually matches that pattern pretty well. Oh, yeah, maybe you can see it there. It looks to me like it matches that pattern quite well, so I haven't got the preheat flame too much. So I think the sort of the big blowback and all the sparks when I first start the cut happens if I start the oxygen, the cutting oxygen, when the flame is already inside the cut piece. If I start the cutting flow before the flame is introduced to the work, I don't seem to get it. So it's another little learning outcome for me. But yeah, this seems to be cutting nicely again. So all this smoke that you see here is because I made a mistake and turned the oxygen off first. So I'm guessing you won't get a lot better than that. The top edge is a lot squarer than it has been on the previous cuts. Might do one more though with the preheat flame down even a bit further. I mean, you've got conflicting things happening here. One rule says adjust the flame until you've got minimal smoke, and the others, but when you do that the preheat flame's too large. So, but I think that's the best result I've had so far, so we'll be putting up with a bit more smoke. So I might do one more though with the preheat flame a bit smaller still. Well, I think that's as good as I'm going to get within my limits. My hand movements aren't particularly smooth, so some of that jerkiness is there. The top edge might be possible to get it a bit squarer, but at least I haven't got any deep gouges or whatever, so I'm going to say I'm happy with that, and if I cut the rest of it like that, it'll be a good thing. Okay, well, I guess the practices have paid off. It's about as good as I could hope for, I think. It is a fairly square top corner. Yeah, I wandered off in a couple of places. That's because I didn't consistently hold the torch upright, I think. Same over there, I guess. But as far as I'm concerned, that's good enough. I don't think I think I'd have to do a lot of practicing to get consistently better than that. And that'll clean up a bit with the angle grinder and be good enough for the edge of my press table. So that's fine. I'm going to cut the other end now to bring the thing to length. Decided to give it absolutely heaps of preheat because I realised that cutting the end off a relatively narrow bar compared to working on a very wide piece of big plate was a different situation, so more preheat probably was required. I did get the cut off to a good start this time though, and remembered to start the cutting oxygen flow outside of the work, so I didn't get the big bang and all the sparks that I've had on the other occasions. And something else I couldn't seem to get the hang of was looking to see what the flame was actually doing. When I was doing the cutting, I was always focusing on where the flame, the cutting flame was actually touching the work. And so I really didn't have much awareness of what was happening on the back side of the plate, or whether it was actually even completely cutting through or whatever. And I don't know how you're supposed to do that, because I just kept focusing on the flame to make sure I was staying on the cutting line and keeping the head upright. But I suppose it comes down to experience. Okay, well, there's another cut that didn't work out so well. At least I got a nice, fairly good top corner. But as it was cutting, I didn't realise that it wasn't coming out the bottom. So there's a couple of spots here where it just didn't cut all the way through. And then, as you can see from these lines, I was actually travelling much too fast for the amount of flame. So I don't know, I just don't seem to be able to put it all together in any, apart from the odd cut that works out really well. Most of them have got something wrong with them. Anyway, the plate is to size now, and the edges aren't very important for the bed plate on the press, so I'll just clean it up a bit and call it done. But clearly I need more practice to be useful as a flame cutter. So for the last long cut, I'm cleaning up that really raggedy edge that was on the plate when I collected it. I suppose it was hacked off that way by somebody in the scrap yard, and they obviously didn't care. And so it wasn't a straight line, and there was big gouges and whatever. So I wanted to have a go at tidying that up a bit. I sort of figured I could hardly make it worse, so why not? And actually the cut seemed to go quite well. Yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't complete the cut in one uninterrupted movement because I needed to stop and reposition the clamp. So that was unfortunate because it naturally introduced additional gouges and defects into the cut. And I repeated the mistake of ending the cut before I'd actually finished the job, so that left a corner uncut. So it's not too bad. A couple of dodgy bits, but and obviously I started going a bit fast again just here. But got a square edge on the top, and the bit came off without too much trouble, as you saw. So all things considered, for a complete amateur, I'm happy with that. And it might be years, if ever, before I cut 25mm plate again. So there's no point trying to improve my skill level beyond what it took to get that. That'll be fine. So what's left to do is cut a couple of notches at each end, just to locate this plate between the uprights so it can't fall out. So that's the next thing to do. So I didn't get any video of actually cutting these slots because I got between the camera and the work. But I did it freehand, and I was actually surprised how easy it was to hold the torch steady and cut those notches. So anyway, that's how I did it, just with a freehand. I thought about using the milling machine or whatever else, and I thought, no, hack it out with a torch would be good enough. Okay, so there we are, just put in place. I've got to do some finishing off. I haven't hit it with the angle grinder yet. It's getting a bit bloody hot though, so I want to call that it for now. But yes, so I just got to clean up a bit with the angle grinder. I've got to do a little bit of work on these attachment points where the ropes attach here. You can't see that from the moment, but they are fouling the end of the table, so that's why I've got this extra pin in here at the moment. So that's no big deal. I'm just going to make a couple of additional brackets to go there. I won't bother showing that because nothing special about that. I won't learn anything from that. It won't be a learning exercise like cutting this thing out was. So have a closer look. Quite a bit more table real estate than those. I mean, obviously, well, I don't imagine it's still a bit warm. I don't imagine I'll leave it on there all the time, but there are certainly plenty of occasions when it's useful to have a bit of space to lay a couple of things out with the odd setups and so on. Anyway, that's it. Well, that wraps this one up. Can't say I'm particularly proud of the end result, but it will do what I want it to do. And this video in many ways is more of a how not to rather than a how to, and I must say I did debate whether or not to even post it. But I figured it might be useful to others who are wrestling with backyarders like myself, who are wrestling with flame cutting and trying to work out what to do to make it work. And I would be really interested to hear from anyone who actually knows what they're doing, who can point at my bumbling efforts and point out what it was I was doing wrong, and what I can do to make things to get better cuts. That would be much appreciated. Well, I hope you found it entertaining anyway, if not useful. If you did, you can do that. Perhaps do the usual like, subscribe and bell business if you haven't already. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.